Next time you're in a group of people, why not try this? Stand straight, make eye contact, and smile. See what happens to your physical responses. See what occurs mentally. Actually, why don't you just try this right now? To me. How do you now feel? To make little changes into big ones, it may all start with subscribing. Remember the old saying to ease the fear of public speaking? Just imagine that everyone in the room is naked. Whatever effect it would actually have on you, I guess, is dependent on who is in the room. However, the reason that saying is universal really speaks to the thought process of not worrying on what others think. If they are naked, well, they won't care if you are. Basically, it is supposed to put you at ease, so you're not focused on your anxiety. Instead, you are focused on what is going on around you. And in order to do that, you have to make eye contact. Use all your senses, and despite what is going on, still have the amazing ability to not faint or burst out laughing. Redirecting your thoughts away from your anxiety to something a little lighter actually has a psychological and physiological effect that can override anxiety. In the last episode, we talked about the number one behaviour that leads to worsening or causing anxiety: avoidance. We now know that avoidance really isn't the answer to controlling our anxiety. And this is where the big social experiment comes in. Well, maybe not too big. We'll start off small and see how we get on. In order to combat social anxiety and feel more confident in social situations, we need to actually be in social situations. Of course, this can be tricky to do if we have avoided being in these types of situations for a long time. That is why approaching a less anxious situation initially and monitoring our reactions from that can then embolden us to stepping a little bit further out of our comfort zone. The goal of behavioural experiments is to find out what really happens in social situations, so that we can learn to think in a pragmatic way. There are a number of steps to conducting a behavioural experiment that enables us to learn as much as possible from social experiences. This might sound repetitive, but here we go again. It all starts with a thought. To learn to think realistically in all situations, we first need to analyse directions our thoughts take us. To begin the social experiment, think about a social situation that triggers anxiety for you, and write down what you think will happen in that situation. What are some of the unhelpful thoughts that arise when you think about going into the situation? Try to be as specific as much as you can around the kind of predictions you may think could occur before and during the event. Next, it's time to do a bit of rating. How would you rate the intensity of your anxiety about the situation? 0 being no anxiety and 10 being extreme anxiety. Now, any effective action needs to contain a plan of approach. What could you do to find out how correct these thoughts really are? How could you find or create a situation that will enable you to test the accuracy of these thoughts while still maintaining a lower anxiety rating? The next step is to observe and examine the evidence. What evidence would you need to look for to check the accuracy of your thoughts? An important note is that this evidence must be clear, observable and objective evidence. One way of thinking about evidence is to consider whether the evidence would hold up in a court of law, or would the judge disregard it because it was too subjective, hearsay, or an opinion instead of a fact. Then of course we need to put all of this into action. We need to conduct the grand experiment, and from there we can then analyse the results of the experiment. What evidence did you observe that might prove that your predictions were true, and what evidence pointed in another direction? And finally, from all this hard work, we can begin to develop some concrete and reliable conclusions. What does the evidence tell you about your initial thought processes? Do they back it up? Or did something occur that surprised you? And that's it. These simple steps can be applied to a situation that might cause some anxiety but doesn't overload the system or lead you to want to run away from it. Our brains are prone to falling back into old thinking habits. If we learn something from the experiment that is different to what we expect, it is helpful to reinforce this new learning in order to carry it on to other situations. That way, it is easier to bring to mind new and helpful information when you need it in the future. In order to anchor and reinforce this new information, we can include some other helpful steps along the way. You might find it helpful to visualize any helpful conclusions you have come to and repeat these helpful conclusions in your mind. You might like to jot it down, any helpful conclusions, on a post-it note or even on your phone. And if you feel like you're beginning to fall back into old thinking patterns, check out your behavioural experiment records to remind you that things are not quite as bad as they seem. Testing out our assumptions, opinions, and what we fear reminds us that what we have experienced in the past may not necessarily occur over and over again. It puts probability and cost into perspective, that even in the worst case scenario of our fears coming true, we can look at this. What is the true cost of that? And should that cost really affect all of our decisions? Now we have all of this in place, the next step is to conduct our own big social experiment. Think on a situation that might elicit mild anxiety in you, and join me next week how we can tackle it in real time. Let me know in the comments what situation that is and how you have handled it in the past. Talk to you soon.